Comey's remarks came as Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid asked the FBI to investigate the threat of Russian tampering with the U.S. elections. The spokesman for Islamic State is dead. Abu Muhammad al-Adnani was reportedly killed while surveying the group's defenses in Aleppo, Syria. German lawmaker Jürgen Hart says if the UK wants the advantages of the European Union's single market following Brexit, it will have to help pay into the EU's budget. Hart, an ally of Chancellor Angela Merkel, says Norway's a non-EU member but contributes to the bloc's finances in return for market access. A Monmouth University poll shows Hillary Clinton leading Donald Trump in Pennsylvania 48% to 40%. Libertarian Gary Johnson is at 6%. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,600 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. Bloomberg West is next.
I'm Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg West. Coming up, the EU hands Apple its harshest tax penalty ever, ordering the iPhone maker to cough up over $14 billion. But will the world's richest company pay? And is Europe effectively putting U.S. tech giants on notice? We will discuss. Plus, he's the godfather of online blogging and a founder of both Twitter and Medium. Ev Williams joins us for a conversation on everything from freedom of the internet to the future of publishing. And making tech M&A history next week. Dell and EMC are set to close their mega multi-billion-dollar deal after it was rubber-stamped by Chinese regulators. We'll bring you all the details. But first, to our lead. European regulators slam Apple with a $14.5 billion tax bill, far and away the largest tax penalty in the EU's 3-year crackdown on so-called sweetheart deals. These are arrangements in which a multinational company moves its profits and costs to wherever they're taxed most advantageously. In this case, Ireland. Its corporate tax rate is the lowest in Western Europe, and it's attracted more than 700 U.S. companies to set up shop there, including Google and Facebook. Apple employs about 6,000 people in Ireland, but in the ruling today, EU Competition Commissioner Margaret Vestager said Ireland allowed Apple to pay an effective tax rate of 1% on its European profits in 2003, down to 0.005% in 2014, and that, she said, gave Apple an unfair advantage. Here she is in an interview with Bloomberg earlier today.
The tax rate in Ireland is 12.5%, and obviously most companies, that be national or multinationals for that matter, well, they pay the tax rate, the corporate tax rate in Ireland, and they have to look at some companies, in case Apple, only pay a tiny fraction of the tax that they themselves have to pay, and that is obviously not fair competition. It's not a level playing field.
We also spoke to the Irish finance minister. The hitch is that Ireland doesn't even want this money, and we will bring you his comments in just a moment. But first, I want to bring in our Bloomberg Intelligence litigation analyst, Matt Larson, in Washington, who's been doing a deep dive into the industry impact of this ruling, as well as our Bloomberg News reporter, Alex Webb, who covers Apple for us. So, Alex, first of all, we knew Apple was going to appeal this, but what exactly was the response from the company today?
I mean, they're not happy, clearly. Who would be paying a bill that big? I think a lot of people were surprised about quite the scale of the back payment they're going to have to come up with. Apple's defense is, they've been in Ireland for a long time. This agreement has been put in place since 1991, and it was always legal. They never used any illegal loopholes, but the agreement they had with Ireland was such that it was perfectly above board under Irish legislation.
We've also got a letter from Tim Cook to users. I believe they included the original picture of Steve Jobs at the first Apple factory in Ireland.
Yeah, Steve Jobs was 25 when in 1980 he went along and opened a 60-person plant in Cork. I mean, Apple, as ever, they always talk about the customer, so this letter's to their customers and not to journalists, although who is writing the stories, of course, the journalists.
So, Matt, what are the next steps for Apple in the legal battle?
The next steps in the legal battle, Apple in Ireland will appeal this decision to the European General Court in Luxembourg. It's the same court that's currently hearing the appeals in the Starbucks Netherlands investigation and the Fiat Chrysler case, both of which are significantly smaller but could give some indication into how this appeals court may take the decisions. This whole process is going to take ballpark 2 years at least to determine, and then after that there are further opportunities to appeal to even higher courts in Europe. So it's going to be quite a while before we get a final decision in any of these cases.
Now, Alex, leading up to this point, the U.S. has been stepping up its defense of Apple, calling the EU a supernatural tax authority, sort of indicating they're overstepping their bounds. What did we hear from the United States government today? They also are not happy. I think, though, you've got to be careful about calling it a defense of Apple. They're not necessarily interested in stopping Apple from paying tax. What they're interested in is ensuring that the tax is paid in the U.S. For every dollar that Apple pays in tax overseas, that is then deductible from the tax that they might have to pay in the US should they ever repatriate their funds. And so, it's 14 billion going to Ireland, 14.5 billion going to Ireland. Well, that's 14.5 billion that's not going to the IRS. All right, Alex Mack, hang on. We mentioned that Apple is fighting this ruling. Ireland is fighting this as well, which leads us to the question, why wouldn't Ireland want to collect $14 billion from the richest country in the world, the richest company in the world? Bloomberg's Mark Barton spoke to Irish Finance Minister Michael Noonan earlier today and pointed out that the opposition party in Ireland would like to see just that.
Why don't you just accept the money and shut up? 13 billion euros plus interest. That's a lot of money.
Because as Minister for Finance, I have a responsibility for advising the government on these matters. This is the government that rescued Ireland from the verge of bankruptcy from 2011 on, and foreign direct investment and the creation of high-level jobs is fundamental to our economic policies. And we stand by our economic policies, and we're going to protect our economic policies.
Sure,
we're not going to get into a situation of short-term gain for long-term damage to the economy.
Standing his ground there, Alex, what kind of long-term damage are we talking about? What have we heard from other tech companies?
This is, as we heard yesterday, I think, speaking to some analysts, people were saying that it's on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being extremely damaging. It's on the lower end of that, 2 to 3. But the thing is that Ireland has 140,000 people employed by US, largely tech companies. The risk is that those jobs start to be put at risk, and it ceases to be the automatic place where American companies might go if they're going to Europe. The thing is also, from the flip side, if you are any other country in Europe, Ireland has like 180 billion euros in debt from when its banks were bailed out, and so this 14.5 billion will go towards paying that off. If you're a German citizen, you're sitting there thinking, why on earth should I subsidize Apple to have 5,500 jobs in Ireland?
So, Matt, I know you've been going into the weeds a bit on this and looking at the tax structures that other companies have. Do any of them have these similar arrangements?
Yeah, a lot of companies make use of Ireland. We kind of consider it like the Austin, Texas of Europe. There's a tech community that's been built up there. Ireland has developed favorable tax laws, specifically relating to transfer pricing, which is what this whole Apple investigation took a look at. And as a result, you've got a lot of companies that have organizations, subsidiaries set up in Ireland that have these transfer pricing arrangements in place. You also have a big contingent of life science pharmaceutical companies, Shire being one of them, that has significant operations in Ireland, both because it's a good place to be, there are favorable tax laws, and there's also favorable treatment in how their taxation system treats these transfer pricing agreements. And so this is a little bit of a warning shot from the European Commission, and may encourage some companies to take a second look at whether maybe they've negotiated too sweet of a tax deal with Ireland, or even take a look at corporate structures and how their overall multinational setup is working for them.
So what about companies like Google or Facebook, for example, which do have big bases in Ireland, and that's really their base in all of Europe?
Yeah, that's exactly right. They have their base in Europe. A lot of companies have headquartered there. LinkedIn, PayPal, EA. even Fidelity Investments have significant operations there. And so when you're one of these organizations, I think you have to be taking a very close look at how your taxation is working, not just in the revenue that you're sending to Ireland, but again, what are the communications that you've had with the tax authorities there? These bills aren't necessarily just, well, here's our revenue, let's take a percentage of it. Is when you're looking at intercompany transfers and kind of deals among subsidiaries, you also have to take into account what basically what the basis is there and what percentage you're applying to that base that's going to be taxed. And so I think companies are going to have to take a closer look at the way their internal operations look and take a second look at the deals that they've struck with Irish tax authorities.
All right, taking a look at Apple shares, ending the day slightly down. Alex, how did investors react today?
I mean, they're relatively blasé about it. It's you know, it's about 6% of their cash reserves. But actually, frankly, the thing that investors want to see is an ability to repatriate that money to the US, because they want to be able to get it in the form of dividends and buybacks. So you know, it's money that they don't have access to now, and losing 19 billion that they don't, or sorry, 14.5 billion they have access to.
Just 14.5.
You know, it's not the end of the world for them.
All right, Alex Webb, our Bloomberg News reporter who covers Apple, our Bloomberg Intelligence litigation analyst Matt Larson in Washington. Thank you both. Of course, we're going to continue to follow this story very closely. Coming up, our guest host for the rest of the hour, Ev Williams, joins us, CEO of Medium, co-founder of Twitter. We will tackle the future of the internet. Are social networks becoming too powerful? Where does digital publishing go from here? Stay with us. This is Bloomberg. Ev Williams has played a major role in shaping how users express themselves online. From founding Blogger in 1999, which he then sold to Google a few years later, he went on to start Odeo, focused on podcasting initially, and it was there that a little side project called Twitter was born. He became CEO of Twitter, left and remains on the board of directors, but he wasn't done creating, and in 2012, he started Medium as a way to publish posts longer than Twitter's 140-character limit. Here with me for the hour, Ev Williams, CEO of Medium.
Thanks for having me.
So great to have you here for the show.
Yeah, you bet.
So I want to start with Medium because obviously you've played such a tremendous role in how we publish online, how we express ourselves online, and Medium is sort of your vision for the future. Give us an update on where Medium is and where it's going.
Sure. So Medium, for those who don't know, is just a place to write stories and ideas, and it's meant to be open to anyone and allow anyone who has something to say of substance to the world to find their audience. And so it's an update on blogging or social media, but it's really focused on things that tend to be longer. It's used both by amateurs and professionals. Everyone from the president and the White House who published on it to individuals who just have personal stories to tell.
Right. So President Obama, Bono, Hillary Clinton. At the same time, you also have publishers like Bill Simmons started The Ringer on Medium. So what do you see as the balance between amateurs, influencers, and publishers?
Well, we think the mix is really important, and it makes the conversation better. And the entire point of Medium is, unlike a standalone website, if you publish on Medium, you're in the mix. It's your ideas bounce around with other people as you're more likely to be found. You can respond. You can highlight. People can find you. And so one of our mottos is that great ideas can come from anywhere. And we need professional journalists and creators and writers creating all the time. But especially when it comes to writing, there are tons of individuals who have unique perspectives and valuable ideas and the ability to articulate them. And so we offer a place to do that and to find your audience. So that mix is what makes it work. It's where a business leader can respond, can write something, and their customer can respond to them, or vice versa. And because there's that diversity of voices, you really get much more insight.
So Medium, I mean, the experience now, it's beautiful, it is simple, it is elegant. Where are you on monetization and how you do maintain that experience and make money at the same time? Yeah,
so we're working on growing the monetization piece right now. We just started it in the spring after working on the platform for a couple years and really making it work for individuals. Now we're focused more on enabling professionals as well, which of course means getting them paid. So we have native advertising as part of the product now, where brands are publishing on Medium and working with the publishers on the professional side, both to tell their stories and to gain audience to those stories. And then some publishers are also implementing our beta subscription program as well. So you can actually create a paywall or a membership program for your content. And that's looking good, but it's in its early stages.
So Hillary Clinton used Medium to explain her VP pick. Tim Kaine responded on Medium. Mitt Romney announced why he's not running for president on Medium. How does that come about? Do you have a team of people trying to get Hillary to post on Medium, and what's the play-by-play?
We have an outreach team that's in DC that's sort of a white glove service team. So they help get the ball rolling. Right now, it's kind of taken on its own momentum. In DC, I think Medium's become the default if whether you are in DC or active in that world and you have something of substance to say and you want to find an audience for it, Medium's really become the default for that. And all the political major president campaigns were on there, save one, and lots of big commentators, professional journalists, etc. And so it's really gotten this momentum now, and people from that world read it. So if you have something to say, you go there to say it.
It's so interesting because these are things that would have been, published as op-eds perhaps in traditional newspapers. You did mention there is one person who is not posted on Medium, and that is Donald Trump.
It's true.
Any efforts to get Trump on Medium?
We're happily open to what he would have to say. So far, he hasn't chosen to expand much beyond his 140 characters in writing, anyway. But we're happy to add his voice to the mix.
He has, of course, taken fine advantage of Twitter.
Right.
He seems to prefer expressing himself in 140 characters. I don't know what's that been like for you, watching from afar, watching Trump take off on Twitter?
Oh, well, kind of same as everyone, I guess. Mixture of bewilderment and some fear, but it's been fascinating to get, especially the most recent revelation that his tweets were, you could distinguish his tweets from his staff by looking at the source. And so years ago, when we built in that ability to see the source, meaning the device that a tweet was posted from, we didn't picture that particular use case for that, but kind of glad that that's there.
Now, Nick Bilton of Vanity Fair had a provocative article where he the title was Silicon Valley created Donald Trump. Do you think that Silicon Valley created Donald Trump, or Twitter especially created Donald Trump, or that without Twitter, Trump would be somehow not where he is?
I'd hate for us to take the credit or the blame for that. I think it's a result largely of our media ecosystem now, which has tremendously good and bad things. And so that's when I started working on the internet, I was very excited that anybody could put their voice out there, and I just really thought the world's going to be smarter, wiser, more intelligent when the truth is out there and unfettered. And really the reason I'm still working in this area is because I realize it's not as simple as that. Mm-hmm. And so the tremendous amount of noise has not necessarily made us smarter. In many ways, it's made us dumber. And so there's so much more we have to do to build on top of the systems and on top of this free flow of information to actually take full advantage of it as a society. So, you know, we still got a lot of work to do.
You've had plenty of high-profile CEOs, tech CEOs, come out saying they're against Trump. You know, where do you stand on that? Do you think he would be good or bad for innovation?
I'm firmly against Trump.
So how do you, as somebody who has built multiple platforms for free speech, how do you balance your own personal political views with your responsibility to the platform and the users? I mean, we just saw this issue come up with Facebook and their trending topics section, where they were accused of deprioritizing conservative stories, which they fervently denied. Right. But it's an interesting dichotomy.
So I will say I'm also not firmly against all Republicans, and what I'm proud of is both on Twitter and on Medium, we've built platforms that are neutral, and we've worked very hard to give an equal shake to both sides. And on Medium, we have many senators, many Congress people, and about an even mix on both sides. We, in fact, in our outreach team, employ an equal number of people who reach out to the right and the left. And there's nothing in our system that biases one side versus the other. And I think that's created a very healthy exchange. And personally, I read and recommend viewpoints from both sides, and because they're on the same platform, again, I think people are more open to them.
Donald Trump, according to Bloomberg, we had a scoop out today that people close to him say he wants to start a media busince. What do you think of that?
I think that'd be very smart of him.
Many media businesses.
I mean, I think there'll be an audience for that. What do you think?
He seems to be getting a lot of interest.
Maybe he could co-host.
That would be fun. All right, Ev Williams, CEO of Medium, co-founder of Twitter. We're going to be speaking with you throughout the next hour. Thank you so much for joining us. Still ahead, we'll continue our deep dive with Ev Williams, my co-host, taking a look at the future of Medium and, of course, Twitter. This is Bloomberg. A story we are watching: Sonos is cutting a deal with Amazon. Users will soon be able to control their high-end Sonos connected speakers from Amazon Echo. This includes third-party subscription services like Spotify. The long-term partnership with Amazon marks a major pivot for Sonos. The company's always maintained the tightest possible control over the software its listeners use to control their speakers. And Dell and EMC are set to complete the biggest tech merger in history next week. The companies just received clearance from China's Ministry of Commerce to go ahead with the deal. It'll bring the two leading providers of data center and corporate computing equipment together as they chase faster growth. The transition was announced in October 2015 and will close on the next month on the 7th. The combined company will begin operating under the new name Dell Technologies. Still to come, more of our exclusive conversation with internet pioneer Ev Williams. We'll discuss how the Twitter co-founder turned Medium CEO has shaped the future of how we talk about ourselves on the internet next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can now listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg West. Let's begin with a check of your first word news. On Wednesday, Brazil's Senate will vote on whether to remove suspended President Dilma Rousseff from office. Lawmakers will have a chance to speak before the vote. Rousseff has denied breaking fiscal rules in her management of Brazil's budget. 37 victims of last week's deadly earthquake in Italy were honored at a state funeral today in the devastated town of Amatrice. An Italian bishop said Amatrice and neighboring towns must be rebuilt because abandoning them would, quote, kill them a second time. The death toll from the quake is at 292. The State Department says about 30 emails regarding the Benghazi attack have been recovered by the FBI. They're among the thousands of Hillary Clinton emails recovered during the Bureau's recently closed investigation into the former Secretary of State's use of a private server. The agency says it needs until the end of September to review them before they're released. President Obama today cut short the sentences of 111 federal inmates convicted of nonviolent drug offenses. The White House says Mr. Obama is granted a total of 673 commutations, more than the previous 10 presidents combined. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 6:30 p.m. Tuesday here in New York, 8:30 Wednesday morning in Sydney. My colleague Paul Allen joins us with a look at the markets. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Mark. Well, the trading day is 30 minutes old in New Zealand. If we take a look at it, well, it's not moving very much. The NZX up just 5 points at the moment. Futures indicate similar inconsequential gains on the ASX when we start trading here. And the picture for the Nikkei is looking mixed right now. We're going to have some data out of Japan today, industrial production for July. That is expected to show a gain for a second straight month, although the 0.7% rise is a slowing from the 2.3% we saw in June. But those numbers would follow on some from very encouraging employment data out of Japan on Tuesday. The market will get its first chance to react to a couple of big bank earnings out of China as well. ICBC posting for the first half a rise in profit of 1% to $11.2 billion. That was in line with estimates. ICBC saw its first decline in its bad loan ratio since 2012, wrote off $6.3 billion in bad loans. That's up 35% on year. The other big bank to watch out of Hong Kong today, Bank of China, for the second quarter. Profit there up 3.4% to $6.9 billion. That beat estimates, and that's despite the bank setting aside a larger buffer for bad loans as well. So that's some of what we're watching around the region today. I'm Paul Allen for Bloomberg TV in Sydney, Australia.
I'm Emily Chang. Medium has become a place where amateurs and influencers of all kinds post longer, more in-depth pieces. President Obama, Bill Gates, Bono, Ford, HBO, just a few examples of people and companies that have used this forum to share their thoughts with the world. The founding editor of now bankrupt Gawker also recently posted her very first story on the site in the middle of a heated debate over freedom of the press and where it stops. Still with us, CEO and founder of Medium and co-founder of Twitter, Ev Williams. So this Gawker situation is really interesting, and I assume she posted it on Medium because the idea is you can't take it down here. But what's your take on Peter Thiel versus Gawker? Is that going too far, or is it fair play?
For Gawker or Peter Thiel?
Peter Thiel. Either, actually.
No, I think it's a little bit scary for the press, obviously, if especially unknown source of money is fighting you. Yeah. And while I wasn't a fan of everything Gawker did, I think in general I'm a fan of freedom of the press. I think it's critical, and the ability to take it out. I think ultimately Gawker should prevail again in appeal, but you know, it would be a bad thing if random media sites can be taken out by people who don't like what they say, obviously.
It's obviously, you know, a really important question. I'm sure it's a question that you deal with behind the scenes a lot. You know, what is free speech? What counts as fair? What is going too far? Especially, I mean, since the earliest days of the internet, and I'm sure when you started Blogger, there were trolls, there was online harassment. It almost seems like nothing's changed.
Well, it's gotten worse for sure, as because I think early days of the internet, it was a little better, and we sort of felt like everybody, it's a big club, and if you're there, you're welcome. And to use a metaphor, we had dinner parties with our front door open, and if you stop by, everyone's kind of glad to see you. And so much of the internet since has evolved with that same default framework. So the idea that anyone can join any conversation is not something that we expect in the real world. And because so many wonderful things come from that online, there's a lot of desire to hold on to that ability, and yet it causes so much problems when you open it up to the mass of society.
Why is it so hard to crack down on online harassment? Why is it so hard to quiet the trolls?
Because the line is always fuzzy. I mean, when you really dig into these issues, it seems much easier from the outside than it is when you actually look at the details. And there's lots of stuff that's banned. A lot of the rhetoric would give you the impression Twitter or other services don't do anything. There's huge teams who are focused on this issue and ban stuff and delete stuff all the time. And where it's tricky is where the lines get blurry, and where if you have a philosophy, we want to defend free speech and we want to allow people. I mean, the principle of free speech is you have to defend speech even if you don't agree with it. And so while it's not a legal requirement, because Twitter is a private entity, as are all these other services, it's a value that we hold, that people should be able to get out thoughts even if they're unpopular, and therefore there's a judgment call all the time. And so, you know, the policies are evolving, the tools are evolving, et cetera, but it's not a trivial issue.
Do you think that Twitter should have taken this on sooner, or?
Yeah, I think, Dick acknowledged that a couple years ago, and I think in myself, even from the earliest days, I think we would have thought about a different architecture for the service had we known how severe this issue would get, because I think it really has gotten a lot worse in terms of the vitriol and the level of the severity of the attacks that some people suffer. And a lot of it is the architecture really of the service, that a lot of what allows really great things does allow the bad things, but I still think there's things we can do. I've met with the team fairly recently that was working on this, and there's a bunch of smart people who are going to be improving it soon.
So look, you are co-founder of Twitter. You're one of the biggest shareholders of Twitter. You've been the biggest champion of Twitter. This is a company that had a market cap high of $25 billion. Now it's $13 billion. Do you think it can ever get back to those heights?
I can't make any real statements, as you know, being a board member of Twitter. I think very abstractly speaking, it's still an incredibly large service, an incredibly valuable service. And there will be the thing that Twitter provides to the world, this real-time information layer, is incredibly valuable and can be a lot more valuable. It's a matter of innovation and development, and there's not an asset like Twitter in the world in terms of the mix of individuals and world leaders and entertainers and all this and the information that's created on a daily basis. And so there's so much more that can come out of that I would say, I'm an optimist in general.
And what's your faith in Jack?
My faith is high in Jack. I fully supported Jack's.
And do you see, and look, I know, you can only go so far, but we've seen a lot of M&A. Do you see Twitter remaining an independent company?
No comment on that. I mean, we're in a strong position right now, I think, and as a board member, we have to consider the right options. But. So last
Twitter/Medium question, Medium is a compliment to Twitter, but it's almost the opposite of Twitter in that it's more in depth, more. Do you see them as potentially opposites in a way? In
some ways, I mean, part of my reason for working on Medium is because in the few years while Twitter grew and Facebook evolved and Instagram and all these other social media platforms really evolved and took an increasing amount of our attention, and as well as the energy and innovation of our technology development, they still all pointed to and talked about non-social media. So articles, text, journalism, was still incredibly important, and people were still consuming more and more of it, but it hadn't evolved as much. At least online publishing hadn't evolved as much over those few years. And so that's why you're right, they're incredibly complementary, I think, even though they're very different, and because they're very different. The Twitter is not really, it's more of a distribution vehicle for more substantive content and a discussion platform than it is somewhere where you expand on ideas or offer, more complex arguments or stories. And so Twitter and Medium in particular are complementary, and that's kind of the reason I wanted to work on Medium.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit more about the future of the internet and where you see it going. Ev Williams, founder and CEO of Medium, stay with me. Quickly, though, I do want to talk about Uber. In Silicon Valley's revolving door, Target's chief marketing officer joining Uber as president of ride-sharing. Jeff Jones will oversee Uber's operations, marketing, and customer support globally. In a blog post, CEO Travis Kalanick described how marketing will integrate into Uber's ground operations. This after Alphabet's chief legal officer, David Drummond, stepped down from Uber's board. Alphabet and Uber are moving into head-on competition, with Google piloting its own ride-sharing service via the Waze mapping app. Coming up, we'll dig into what the future of the internet looks like, at least according to Ev Williams. Will Google and Facebook remain as powerful as they are today? What will the role of social media be? My guest host, Ev Williams, returns. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg West. I'm Emily Chang. We're still here with Ev Williams, co-founder of Twitter, now CEO of Medium. Also joining us, Brad Stone, our senior executive editor for global technology at Bloomberg. And Ev, of course, you were a pioneer of the internet. You've had a special hand in shaping the web as we know it today. And the growth of the internet is a topic that you've written about, discussed in depth. You, Brad, as well, you're a multi-time author. So my first question, have social networks become too big? You can take that.
Yes. And no. I don't think they're too big in general. I think scale is hard. Everything. We're not used to being connected to thousands of people, and we're not used to discussing things among dozens of people or people we don't know. So many very basic social networks in real life have always existed, and they've never been as big as they are online. But obviously, from a power and business perspective, size helps. The defensiveness and the value of social networks it grows somewhat exponentially with the size.
Well, clearly more advertising dollars are funneling to the major technology companies, to the major social networks. People's attention is funneling to these platforms. And, I guess I wonder, are we losing some of that wonderful openness of the internet? And is there a cost to a dependence on just a handful of platforms?
There for sure is a cost to that dependence. And, I think that's the inevitable trajectory we're on, is that a few major platforms, if you broaden it from just social networks to media platforms in general and communication platforms, it's going to almost as a law of nature, going to centralize and consolidate. And I think there's both pros and cons to that for sure.
So what about the mobile web in particular? You have Apple, you have Google, and these are the two companies that basically decide what apps we use, and then it's a very small number of those apps that we actually spend a lot of time on. And I wonder, is the internet actually becoming smaller rather than bigger?
It's becoming more closed, for sure. I mean, this is a trend that's been going on for a long time. I think many of us who develop software for the internet, thinking back even 10 years, would have considered it blasphemy that we have to get our software approved to release it to customers. And that's something that in many ways feels like a step backwards in terms of openness and development. In exchange, you get distribution, you get infrastructure, you get all kinds of other things that help both companies and the customers.
And not to raise the tar baby of net neutrality, but you also have the carriers like T-Mobile that are introducing these unlimited data plans, which actually offer unlimited access to a kind of a curated set of sites and video services, and not others. And that raises another whole host of questions. Are we getting, in the guise of free, are we getting access to some of the internet but not all of it?
Yeah. For sure, and it's part of the same issue, and I don't know where that's going to go, but I think the idea that the internet was built as this highly decentralized, open platform was crucial, and yet the paradox is it's a great place for building most of the valuable things on the internet are centralized platforms or marketplaces. And it's great at creating those. And once you create one of those, you get increasing returns.
Now, you have some interesting theories. You say that the internet is more like TV than we think. What do you mean by that?
Well, this is my current obsession is how do we up-level the quality of media on the internet in the way that TV has evolved over the last several years. And if you think about it, the feed that we're all used to is a lot like turning on the TV and flipping channels. You're kind of saying what's on, and even though it's personalized and often lots of good stuff you want, it's not very intentional what you consume. It's based on whatever catches your attention at the time or caught your friend's attention or those you follow. Whereas, and so not just because it's like video, or it's increasingly video, but it's this experience of sort of show me some stuff. Whereas TV today has actually evolved, and what we do is we sit down and we look at our DVR or Apple TV or Netflix and we have a limited selection of highly curated shows, and as a result, those shows have gotten a higher quality. They tell more complex stories. You consume them linearly, generally from beginning to end. And the business models have improved as well. It's a mix of advertising and subscriptions. Oftentimes, we don't subject ourselves to ads anymore. And I think these mechanism matters a lot. So the ability for DVRs, the ability to stream content has changed the nature of the content as well as the business model of the content. I think the same thing, I think it's just still early days in terms of content and media on the internet. And if we can invent the new distribution and consumption models, maybe we can upgrade everything.
So do you see the internet becoming less or more monopolistic in the future? Like, do you see the Apples and Googles and Facebooks getting bigger and stronger, or will other companies break through? We just can't imagine what that looks like yet.
Well, I mean, we under the last 8 years of the Obama administration, we've had very weak antitrust enforcement in the United States. I guess one question will be whether that changes in the next presidential administration. We've seen some pushback even today in Europe on the large technology companies. companies. I think that's probably a big part of it. And look, I mean, these companies get more and more successful, more and more powerful because people love their services. I mean, we're living in the age of the supremacy of the feed because people love the feed. And then, we as a news organization, we see all this traffic coming to us from the Facebooks and the Snapchats and of the world, and we become more and more dependent on it. So, to the extent that we find new business models, it's because companies like Medium, will have to invent alternatives that are strong and kind of break the grip that these social networks have on our time.
And that last quick question, you also say the internet is like a city, so that sort of leads me there. How so?
Well, it has to do with the same point. There's this migration that is similar to the migration to urban areas, which has been happening over several decades now, and the percentage of the world that lives in urban areas now and is projected to into 2050 is going to be a majority of people. And the similarity is people trade, it's a trade-off. You trade flexibility, you trade openness, you trade the ability often to do whatever you want on your own land and to live in a city where you have access to culture, access to other people, ideas, economic opportunities. And the same thing happens online. These companies build consolidation and you bump into people and you trade the same thing. All
right. Ev Williams, co-founder of Twitter, CEO of Medium. We got one more minute with you after this quick break. Brad Stone, our global tech editor, thank you for popping by. I do want to take one look at one story that is out of this world. SpaceX is preparing to cross another milestone. The company has found a taker for the first flight of one of its recycled rockets. Luxembourg-based SES says it will send its next communication satellite into orbit on a previously flown Falcon rocket. The companies haven't announced what the trip will cost SES, but they have said the price will be discounted. The reusable rockets are a major part of SpaceX CEO Elon Musk's plan to cut the cost of space travel and reach Mars by 2018. Tomorrow on Bloomberg, do not miss a conversation on commodities with Citigroup's Ed Morse. That is happening 6 a.m. New York time, 11 a.m. in London on surveillance. This is Bloomberg. Now to a story that is trending today. Tech entrepreneur Kim.com has won the right to live stream his appeal against his extradition to the U.S. The live stream is actually already online, showing the comings and goings at the courthouse. This after a New Zealand judge ruled earlier today that the founder of Mega Upload can stream the court proceedings. .com is facing conspiracy, racketeering, and money laundering charges, and potentially decades in jail. He took to Twitter immediately after the decision, saying, "I will post the live streaming link here ASAP." This is breaking new ground. New Zealand at the forefront of transparent justice leadership. Twitter co-founder Ev Williams still with me here now. Something that's also trending on Twitter, Ev, Twitter Moments. I scanned that before you came in to find something good. At Classic Tags, which lets people share advice under the hashtag I tell my team self.
Oh my God.
So I wanted to get your advice, to hear what you would tell your teen self. And actually, I believe we have some video of you from the early days talking about the internet.
Oh, really?
We're going to try to pull, that's not you.
Close.
We're going to try to pull that up. But first, you know, given everything that you've been through, what would you tell your teen self? What advice would you give yourself?
Talk to the girl. Move to California sooner.
I love that. Okay.
You know, just trust your gut.
Anything about starting a company?
Definitely do that. That worked out fairly well. But that wasn't, you know, I didn't have any problem with that. Do more sooner. Act.
So what advice do you have for, you know, aspiring entrepreneurs, the people who are too scared to take the risks that you took?
What I usually tell people when I start talking to them is just simplify and focus. I mean, you can break anything down and just it's great to have a grand vision, but it's surprising how successful you can be and how big something you can be if you zoom in on it. So there's still millions of opportunities in the world, and often you don't see that because you're looking too broadly. And I think if you narrow your focus, you can find surprising worlds, just like we did with Twitter.
And why do you keep creating? Like, why aren't you sitting on a beach right now? Why are you here talking to me? Why do you have another company? Why are you doing the startup thing all over again?
That's a lot of, I don't know about all those things, but I was compelled to work on Medium just because it was, the work wasn't done. There's still so much potential in using the internet to help each other and help each other with ideas. And what I like to say is that the answer to most of our problems are already here, but they're in someone else's head.
Right.
So the internet is this great system for getting it out of your head and into mine.
Okay, you can find that video of Ev Williams when he's like 15 years old talking about the internet on YouTube. It didn't come up, but it's amazing. Ev, thank you so much for stopping by today. It was great to have you.
City. This is Charlie Rose.
You have every honor that a man could have. You've got
almost
Oscars.
No.
No Oscar?
No Oscars. I got the Irving
Then why are they
Thalberg
giving
Award.
you this award then if you don't have an Oscar?
I don't have anything. I don't really